In my wildest dreams, I never dreamed that the engagement of my own sister would put me on a path that would lead to both temptation and turmoil. When I was 29 years old, I was living a reasonably tranquil life in London. I was working as a marketing executive and taking pleasure in the city's rich culture. Isabel, my younger sister, had always been the more outspoken of the two of us. She was full of life, captivating, and the kind of person who could make any room brighter. I was truly thrilled for her when she announced her engagement to Oliver, a gorgeous and successful architect with whom she was engaged. On the other hand, I had no idea that Oliver would bring a secret into my life that would have the potential to completely unravel everything. Before they got engaged, Isabel and Oliver had been together for 2 years, and from the outside, it appeared as though they were the ideal couple. Oliver was a fascinating individual who possessed black hair, sharp features, and an air of self-assurance that made him quickly endearing to others. At first glance, he appeared to be the kind of man who had everything under control, and Isabel fell head over heels in love with him. I, as her older sister, was overjoyed for her since she had met someone who adored her, and the forthcoming wedding of the two of them was everyone's favorite topic of conversation in the family. It was when Isabel asked me to assist her in planning the wedding that things started to go wrong. It goes without saying that I was honored, and I dove headfirst into the assignment with a lot of excitement. We spent numerous hours together, going through bridal magazines, going to several venues, and talking about every single component of the wedding. Isabel was overjoyed, and I was delighted to be of assistance to her in any way that I could assist her. Nevertheless, as the weeks progressed, I became aware of something that seemed peculiar. Oliver, who had always been attentive and participated in the planning of the wedding, appeared to be distant whenever we were all together. Initially, I attributed it to the stress that he was experiencing at work because he had been working on a significant project that was taking up the majority of his time. On the other hand, there was something else, something that I was unable to pinpoint exactly right now. All of a sudden, one evening, everything was different. Isabel had ventured out with a group of friends to celebrate her approaching hen party, which was scheduled to take place on a Friday evening. My phone rang with a message from Oliver, interrupting my plans to spend the evening at home, where I would catch up on some work. I was perplexed as to why he was texting me rather than Isabel, and I paused for a few while before opening it. "Is it possible for us to talk? This is something that I have to tell you." Yes, it is essential. It caused my heart to skip a beat. What could possibly be the reason for him to tell me something that he was unable to tell Isabel? A feeling of discomfort began to take hold of me, but I responded to his text message by agreeing to meet him at a tiny cafe close to where I live. I arrived to find Oliver already present at the location, where he was seated at a table in the corner with a beverage in front of him. His normally self-assured posture was replaced by a more vulnerable one, and he appeared to be in a state of tension. As my anxiousness continued to increase, I sat down opposite of him and attempted to conceal it. "Oliver, what gives you the creeps?" I inquired while maintaining a light tone. "Will everything be all right?" He seemed to be searching for the appropriate words as he gazed at me for a considerable amount of time. After a long pause, he eventually said with a solemn tone of voice, "No, it's not. There is something that I need to discuss with you, but I am not sure how to come across to you." I became aware of a knot rising in my stomach. Is Isabel the subject of this? Something seems to be awry between the two of you. The expression on his face was ambiguous as he shook his head. No, Isabel is not the subject of this discussion. It's all about us. I was perplexed and blinked. Ourselves? In what way do you mean? In a sign of exasperation, he let out a sigh and ran his hand through his hair. I am aware that this is going to come across as completely insane, and I do not wish to make things awkward, but it's impossible for me to quit thinking about you, Emma. He said something that struck me like a ton of bricks. For a moment, I was absolutely taken aback by his gaze. The question is, Oliver, what are you talking about? You are going to marry my sister, right? The words I know came out of his mouth in a hurry, bearing the weight of regret. And Isabel is someone I genuinely care about. In spite of this, there has been a connection between us ever since I first met you. I have attempted to disregard it and to expel it from my mind, but it is becoming increasingly difficult to do so. I was experiencing a mixture of terror, guilt, and something else that I didn't want to confess to myself, and my heart was racing faster than ever before. Yes, Oliver, you are correct. You are unable to accomplish this. My sister's name is Isabel. You are loved by her. The pain in his voice was audible as he said, I know it's wrong. But I am unable to control how I am feeling, Emma. The thought of you keeps popping into my head. Whenever I am in your presence, whenever we are in the same room together, it seems as if there is a link between us. Do not pretend that you have not experienced it as well. Not only did I want to refute it, but I also wanted to tell him that he was mistaken and that I had never had any feelings for him. On the other hand, the fact was that there were times when I had observed him in a manner that I shouldn't have. These were fleeting moments that I had not spoken about. A smile that lasted in my head for a longer period of time than it should have, a glance that was held for a little bit longer than it should have been. On the other hand, I had repressed those emotions and buried them deep within me since I was aware that they were banned. As I spoke to Oliver, my voice was shaking. Oliver, we are unable to do this. To Isabel, this is not a fair treatment. In addition to being my sister, she is also your fiancé. In this manner, we are unable to betray her. He reached across the table and grabbed my hand, and the sensation of his contact sent a rush of electricity through me. I am aware that it is difficult, and I am aware that it is false. To walk away from this situation without knowing whether or not there is something genuine between us is impossible for me. Oh, Emma, I have to know this. I couldn't help but stare at him, my mind racing with a maelstrom of competing ideas. The situation was a complete and utter failure. It was impossible to deny the sincerity in his voice and the way he was looking at me, but it was impossible to ignore. Although tears were beginning to form in my eyes, I hushed Oliver and said, "This is crazy. We are unable to accomplish this." In a low voice, he responded, "I am aware of that. However, I am unable to give the impression that I do not have these emotions. I am curious as to whether or not you share my sentiments." In addition to the fact that my heart was thumping in my chest, I could feel tears welling up inside of me. This is something I could not do. I could not inflict such pain on my sister. However, the reality was that there was a small, shadowy part of me that was eager to get a glimpse of the potential outcomes of this situation. When I finally spoke, my voice was hardly audible, and I murmured, "I don't know." The phrase, "I don't know what to do." "I beg you, Emma, to tell me the truth," he pleaded, his eyes pleading with me through his words. "Are you experiencing any feelings for me? Is there anything at all?" As I stared down at our hands clasped together, my thoughts were racing. Not only did I know what I ought to say, but I also knew that I ought to tell him to leave, and that we ought to never again discuss this matter. However, I was unable to find the words. Rather than that, I found myself nodding my head and shedding tears as I admitted the truth to both myself and to him. "Yes," I mumbled, my voice shaking slightly as I did so. "Yes, I do," she replied. The sense of relief that flowed across his face was tangible, and he softly grasped my hand. "I am grateful to you for being truthful with me. I am aware that this is not a simple task." Attempting to maintain a steady breathing pattern, I brushed away my tears. What should we do at this point? Although he was looking at me, his expression was confused. "I'm not sure," she said. "Despite the fact that I do not wish to cause Isabel any harm, I cannot continue to act as if there is no connection between us. There is a need for us to figure things out, but we must proceed with caution." As a profound feeling of dread began to grip me, I shook my head in agreement. "Oliver, we can't allow her to find out in any way. That would be the last of her." As he spoke, his voice was laced with remorse. "I know," he murmured. "I don't want to cause her any harm. At the same time, we cannot disregard this either." It was some of the most challenging days of my life that followed the events that transpired. I made an effort to avoid being alone with Oliver, to concentrate on the preparations for the wedding, and to ignore my feelings that I was experiencing. However, this was not achievable. The tension that existed between us was perceptible whenever we were in the same room together. I was constantly reminded of the secret that we were maintaining, whether it was by a glance or an unintentional touch. The following evening, Isabel extended an invitation to me to visit their apartment in order to assist with some last-minute wedding preparations. Understanding that Oliver would be present made me anxious, yet I was unable to say no to the invitation. Isabel was in a good mood when I arrived, and she was eager to show me the finishing touches that she had put to the seating arrangements by showing me the final touches. Her eyes shone with joy as she questioned, "Isn't it perfect?" when she posed the question. Although I was attempting to put the guilt to the back of my mind, I managed to muster up a grin. "You are absolutely right, Isabel. The work that you've done is astounding." A grin spread across her face as she looked at me, and then she turned her attention to Oliver, who was seated on the sofa and observing us with a serious expression. Without Oliver, I would not have been able to survive. What a wonderful supporter he is. As a result of knowing what was going on behind her back, I experienced a twinge of remorse. As I spoke, my voice was strained as I said, "He's a great guy." She glanced at the screen of her phone as it buzzed, and Isabel looked at it. "Oh, I should take this," she said. "It is the florist there. I will be back in a moment." I felt the tension in the room increase as she left the room. I was aware that Oliver was looking at me, and I was aware that we were there by ourselves, despite the fact that this was the very last thing I desired. In a low voice, he whispered, "Emma," and his voice was filled with sorrow. "We need to have a conversation." With a shake of my head, I attempted to contain the tears that were on the verge of bursting out of my eyes. On the other hand, there is nothing to discuss, Oliver. We are unable to accomplish this. There is no way that Isabel deserves this. "I know," he responded, his voice trembling with pain. "However, I am unable to resist thinking about you. It is not possible for me to just claim that none of this is genuine." The moment I gazed up at him, my heart began to break. "Too bad, Oliver, we have to. For the sake of Isabel, we have to act like if." Immediately after I had finished my sentence, he got to his feet and walked across the room, therefore reducing the gap that separated us. He reached out and cradled my face in his hands in a gentle manner, and the sensation of his touch sent a chill down my spine. An expression of despair could be heard in his voice as he murmured, "I can't lose you, Emma. Without knowing whether or not we have the potential to have something real, I am unable to go through with this wedding." Whenever I glanced up at him, tears began to stream down my face, and my heart began to hurt. "Oliver, we are unable to accomplish this. The time is past." In a timid and gentle kiss, he moved in close to me and lightly brushed his lips against mine. The kiss was full of yearning, and it reflected my own desperation in a way that was quite similar to it. And despite the fact that I wanted to pull away, I was unable to do so. As I allowed myself to become engrossed in the moment, I kissed him back while simultaneously holding his shirt in my hands. However, the sound of a door shutting forced me to return to the present moment. My heart was hammering in my chest as Isabel stepped back into the room, fully oblivious to what had just occurred. I hastily drew away from her, all the while my heart was pounding. She greeted us with a smile and said, "I'm sorry about that." The florist had some inquiries regarding the centerpieces, the florist said. As I attempted to maintain my breathing, I pushed myself to grin. "No need to worry. Is everything in order?" Unaware of the tension that was present in the room, she simply nodded. "Yes, everything is in order." I was overcome with a sense of remorse, and I was aware that I could not continue to remain in that location any longer. I spoke in a trembling voice and added, "I ought to get going. Tomorrow, I will be getting an early start." Isabel appeared dissatisfied but did not make any commotion. "All right, I appreciate you and your visit, Emma." "Yes, I'll be seeing you very soon." As I quickly grabbed my coat and made my way out of the room, I gave a slight nod and avoided Oliver's eyes. As soon as I stepped out of the apartment, I had the sensation that I could at long last take a breath. On the other hand, the guilt continued to be present, prodding me and reminding me of the boundary that I had violated. In the days that followed, the pain was excruciating. My thoughts kept going back to that kiss and how Oliver had made me feel. I couldn't stop thinking about it. However, I was aware that it was a mistake and that I could not allow it to occur once more. It was imperative that I safeguard Isabel, even if doing so meant causing me to experience emotional distress. Then, on a particular evening, I got a text message from Oliver. "We need to have a conversation. Would you kindly meet me for the very final time?" Because I was aware that going would only make things worse, I realized that I shouldn't go. In spite of my better judgment, I went ahead and agreed. As I approached him, the brisk evening air was stinging at my skin. We met at a tiny park that was located adjacent to my apartment. "Emma," he said, his voice displaying a great deal of emotion. "I really apologize for anything. I have never intended to cause you or Isabel any harm. But I can't seem to get you out of my mind forever. I am unable to forward with this wedding without first determining whether or not we might have had a genuine relationship." The moment I gazed up at him, my heart began to break. "Oliver, it is already too late. Within the next several weeks, you will be getting married. We are unable to accomplish this." "Yes, I am aware," he responded, his voice shaking slightly. "To tell you how I feel, however, I had to see you. I had to see you. Isabel is someone I love, yet I can't ignore the feelings that we have." As I listened to him, tears began to well up in my eyes, and my heart began to hurt. "Oliver, I am concerned about you as well. But this is not fair to Isabel in any way. She has no right to go through this." As he spoke, his voice was laced with remorse. "I know," he murmured. "However, I am unable to leave you without first determining whether or not we could have had something," she said. As tears streamed down my cheeks, I continued to shake my head. "We are unable to, Oliver. The time is past." With a touch that was both soothing and reassuring, he extended his hand and took my hand. "Emma, if you please. Let me know that you are experiencing something as well." While I was looking into his eyes, I was looking for any indication of uncertainty. Nevertheless, all I saw was sincerity. Even though he meant every word, I was horrified by his words. Because, to tell you the truth, I did have feelings for him nonetheless. However, I would never betray my sister in such a manner. It was impossible for me to bear the guilt. "I'm sorry, Oliver," I called out in a hushed whisper, my voice shaking. "However, we are unable to accomplish this. You are obligated to carry out the wedding at whatever costs. It is imperative that you wed Isabel." He turned his gaze onto me, his face displaying a mixture of anguish and sorrow. He whispered, "I understand," as he spoke. "On the other hand, Emma, I will never forget you." After that, he leaned in close to me and gave me a final kiss, a kiss that was jam-packed with all of the feelings that we were unable to articulate via words. After that, he vanished, leaving me to stand in the park by myself with my heart crushed into a million pieces. In my entire life, the days running up to the wedding were some of the most difficult days of all. The weight of what had occurred was crushing me, and despite my best efforts to concentrate on the preparations and to be there for Isabel, I was feeling overwhelmed. At every moment that I glanced at her, I had the sensation that I was a liar, that I was living a lie. After what seemed like an eternity, the day of the wedding arrived, and I put on a brave face, resolved to be the greatest sister I could possibly be. During the time that Isabel was getting dressed, I was by her side, and I fought back tears as I watched her beam with joy. I spoke to Isabel with a shaking voice and said, "You look absolutely stunning." An expression of love and thanks could be seen in her eyes as she smiled at me. "It is my pleasure, Emma. I am unable to accomplish this without your assistance." As I stood there, watching my sister and her new husband have their first dance, I couldn't help but wonder what could have transpired if I had made a different choice, if I had allowed myself to give in to the temptation, if I had followed my heart instead of my conscience. I couldn't help but wonder what would have happened if I had made a different choice. However, there are some feelings that are better off being kept hidden, and there are some secrets that are better off being kept hidden. And despite the fact that it was painful, I was aware that I had made the correct decision. I am doing this for Isabel, Oliver, and me personally.